So today we are going to start with heart failure. So we have already studied the ischemic heart diseases. We have already studied the acute rheumatic fever and the complications of acute rheumatic fever with valve regurgitations and valve stenosis. Now we are going to see about the heart failure. So before we go into the heart failure, let us rebrush the physiology for heart. We know that the function of the heart is to contract and pump oxygenated blood to the body and deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And in order to do that, heart beats at a regular pace with the help of an SA node which independently discharges current through the heart, and with the help of SA node and AV node heart beats at a rhythmic pace. The beatings of the heart can be the beatings of the heart are systole and systole and diastole makes one cardiac cycle. So cardiac cycle is the cardiac activity, or the one cycle of cardiac activity is called as cardiac cycle. It is divided into systole and diastole, and it is completely in approximately zero point 0.8 seconds in a resting heart. So in diastole and systole, they complete in zero point 0.8 seconds. We already know what is systole. Systole is pumping. When the blood is pumped via the ventricles, that is called as systole. The contracting or the pumping is called as systole, and the relaxation of the ventricles and the filling of ventricles with the blood, when the ventricles they relax, there is filling of the blood, that is called as diastole. So diastole is relaxation, systole is pumping. And the cardiac cycle, right? So in this diagram there are two rings. One is the inner ring, the small ring, and one is the outer ring. The inner ring is the atrial systole and diastole. So atrial systole starts from here and it completes here in approximately 0.1 seconds. It is followed by atrial diastole when the atria relaxes and it is filled with blood. Atrial diastole is the remaining 0.7 seconds. Right, let us come to the outer ring. Outer ring is the ventricular systole, right, when the ventricles contract and they push the blood into the aorta and into the pulmonary artery. So ventricular systole, which is approximately 0.3 seconds, and the ventricular diastole, which is approximately 0.5 seconds. Right, it has further divisions with volumic and isovolumetric relaxation and isovolumetric contractions, ventricular contractions, ventricular ejections. I hope you are well aware of these terms. Right, they are not of much importance in the heart failure, so I'm not going to deal with them. The P wave, the ECG, the P wave comes when the atrial systole takes place. When the atria they contract, the P wave is generated, and when the ventricular systole is there, when the ventricles are contracting, the QRS complex comes, right? You can see it here. Atrial systole produces P wave, the ventricular systole produces QRS wave, and the T wave is produced by the ventricular diastole, and atrial diastole is in between these. Next is the heart rate. So heart beats at a regular pace of let us say between 60 to 100 in a healthy individual. However, this rate is not fixed. We need to change this rate, or the body needs to change this heart rate in order to meet the different demands of the body. For example, if somebody is using too much energy, then the body needs to pump the blood effectively into the circulation. So the heart rate is the beats per minute, how many times the heart beats per minute, which is approximately 72, right, and is in between 60 to 100. Below 60 it is called as bradycardia, and above 100 it is called as tachycardia. So this heart rate is regulated by nervous system and the hormonal system, and these nervous system and hormonal systems, they are intertwined with each other. Together they work for it, right? The hormone system controls the nervous system and the nervous system controls the hormonal system as well. Together they work, so that is why it is called as neurohumoral regulation of heart rate. So nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, right, when it is stimulated by the baroreceptors and the chemoreceptors present in the carotid artery and present in the aortic arc, right, when the stimulation of these receptors leads to the activation of autonomic nervous system, and this autonomic nervous system via sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system increases or decreases the heart rate, right. So quick recap, nervous system is divided into CNS and PNS. CNS is brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is the motor neurons and the sensory neurons. The motor neurons, they are further TNS and SNS, autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is again divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system gives a flight or fight response. That means whenever the body is in stress, sympathetic nervous system activates and gets the body out of those stressful conditions. Right. This sympathetic nervous system has neurotransmitters which are epinephrine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline, and noradrenaline, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Parasympathetic nervous system has neurotransmitters as acetylcholine, and it gives a relaxing response in general, right? So what happens? The baroreceptors or the chemoreceptors at the carotid body and at the arc of aorta and other places of the body also, right, in CNS they are also there. So these receptors, the baroreceptors, they sense the change in pressure and volume of the blood, and they send this signal through the sensory nerve fibers to the sensory neurons. They send the signal to the medulla oblongata, and medulla oblongata has a cardioregulatory center which stimulates the heart rate via the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Basically, it has an autonomic nervous system control over the heart. The parasympathetic nervous system relaxes the heart, that is, it reduces the heart rate, and the sympathetic nervous system, it activates the heart, right, and it increases the heart rate via the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine, whereas parasympathetic reduces the heart rate by the release of acetylcholine. Parasympathetic nerve fibers constitute the vagus nerve, right. Similarly, this sympathetic nerve supply is also to many other organs, and one organ which we are concerned of is the adrenal medulla over the kidney, right. So that is how the heart rate is regulated. Number one, by nervous system, by autonomic nervous system. So whenever these baroreceptors perceive the changes in the pressure and volume. So whenever the pressure and volume it is changed in the arc of aorta and in the carotid artery, it senses that, and it sends the signal to the ANS. The ANS brings the signal through the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and accordingly it increases and decreases the heart rate. The parasympathetic nervous system decreases the heart rate and the sympathetic nervous system increases the heart rate. Second is the hormonal system. So the adrenal gland, whenever the autonomic nervous system is stimulated, it also influences the adrenal gland to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, and these catecholamines again in a cycle again activates the ANS more, leading to increase in heart rate, or directly also they can increase the heart rate, right. So epinephrine and norepinephrine again they do the sympathetic adrenergic stimulation, right. The sympathetic system gets stimulated by these epinephrine and norepinephrine released by the adrenal glands, and thereby increasing the heart rate. This is called as positive chronotropic effect, right. Increase in heart rate is positive chronotropic effect. whereas decrease in heart rate is negative chronotropic effect. So now the next physiology to understand is the blood pressure. So we know that heart is a pumping organ and it pumps the blood with a force, and that force is monitored as blood pressure. So blood pressure is because of the pumping action of the heart, and blood pressure basically depends on two things: one, blood volume, and second, contractility of the heart muscle. Contractility means the contracting power of the heart muscle. Contraction, the force of the contraction is contractility, right? Blood volume is the volume, it is in liters or milliliters. So these two factors determine the blood pressure. Blood pressure is again controlled, regulated by neurohumoral system. The nervous system, again the autonomic nervous system, again under the influence of baroreceptors and chemoreceptors. Baroreceptors detect the pressure changes. Chemoreceptors changes the chemical changes in the blood. Suppose if the blood has become too much acidic, right, by more carbon dioxide in it, then also it will increase the heart rate. It will also increase the ANS also will also increase the respiratory rate, right? So the baroreceptors and the chemoreceptor detects changes in the blood like decrease in oxygen saturation, increase in carbon dioxide saturation, the pH of the blood. So these chemoreceptors and the baroreceptors, they give signals to the autonomic nervous system via the sensory fibers, and ANS, autonomic nervous system, gets activated, especially the sympathetic nervous system in this case, where the blood pressure is falling, and it increases the contractility of the heart, which is positive inotropic effect, thereby increasing the blood pressure, right? When the heart starts to beat with more force, right, the contracting power of the heart, the contractility is increased, it will lead to increase in pressure, increase in blood pressure. So that is positive inotropic effect via sympathetic nervous system, via the activation of sympathetic nervous system. Second, the hormonal system. So hormonal system, so under the influence of autonomic nervous system and decrease in blood pressure, the posterior pituitary gland senses these. The posterior pituitary gland senses the decrease in blood pressure. The posterior pituitary gland, also under the influence of autonomic nervous system, right, is stimulated, and it starts secreting the antidiuretic hormone, also called as vasopressin. This antidiuretic hormone, it works over the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule, and starts reabsorbing the water in the kidney. So water absorption becomes more. Also, it do the vasoconstriction of the body. So the blood vessels in the body, they constrict, right? Together these mechanisms, the more water absorption and vasoconstriction, will lead to increase in blood volume, thereby leading to increase in blood pressure. So students, here is a very important concept, that how the body raises its blood pressure, because blood pressure is a very basic entity in order for the body to survive, right? After oxygen, blood pressure needs to be maintained in order to um, uh, in order to make the blood flow inside the blood vessels. So now we know that our body has approximately 70% of water, and that water is mostly in the interstitial spaces, that is outside the blood vessels. And whenever body needs more blood pressure, it takes water from those interstitial spaces and put it inside the blood vessels, thereby increasing the overall blood volume, thereby generating more pressure. Because when the blood volume is more, the pressure becomes more. The heart starts to beat more. This is according to the Starling's law. You can read this law. So the contractility also increases when the blood volume is more, and contractility is also depending on the autonomic nervous stimulation, the sympathetic nervous stimulation. System, the sympathetic nervous stimulation also leads to increase in contractility of the heart. Basically, it depends on the calcium influx. The sympathetic nervous system, it increases the calcium influx into the heart muscles, thereby making the heart muscles to beat with more force, or to contract with more force. So you need to understand that the blood volume plays an important role in maintaining the blood pressure, or basically in increasing the blood pressure. So whenever the body has to increase the blood pressure, it increases the overall blood volume of the body by taking water from the interstitial spaces into the blood vessels. So it do so with the help of ADH. The ADH starts secreting start um, um, mm, absorbing more water because of the ADH. Water absorption is increased in the PCT, leading to increase in blood volume. Thereby, increasing in blood volume or increase in blood volume leads to raised blood pressure. Third is after posterior pituitary, third is kidney. So under the influence of decrease in blood pressure, whenever the body senses the baroreceptors and the chemoreceptors in the CNS and in the arc of aorta and other places, whenever they senses the decrease in blood pressure, the kidney starts secreting an enzyme renin, right, which converts the angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, right. Angiotensinogen is a protein, is a enzyme which is secreted by the liver. So this renin, it alters the angiotensinogen into angiotensin in the blood, and this angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 is responsible for the release of aldosterone from the adrenal gland of the kidney, right. So this aldosterone, again, it is a water and sodium absorbing. It absorbs the water and sodium. It basically absorbs the sodium, and the water also follows with the absorption of sodium, right. So it helps in the absorption of sodium and water from the PCT into the blood vessels. So the blood vessels now have more water and more sodium, right, which leads to increase in blood volume, and thereby blood pressure increases. Also, this aldosterone is a vasoconstrictor, and by constricting the blood vessels, also the overall blood volume increases. Now, this is the second concept, that how the body maintains the blood pressure. So, our blood vessels are having smooth muscle, and those smooth muscles can constrict and relax. That is called as vasoconstriction and vasorelaxation or vasodilation. So this vasoconstriction, whenever there is vasoconstriction, right, the lumen of the blood vessels, it becomes narrow, thereby the overall blood volume increases, right. So vasoconstriction leads to the increase of blood volume, right. Whereas the vasodilation, if these blood vessels they are dilated, it will lead to the decrease in blood volume. The overall blood volume decreases in the body. So if the body wants to increase the blood pressure, it do vasoconstriction. It do so by vasoconstriction. So vasoconstriction and water and sodium absorption in the kidney and from other interstitial spaces, the body increases its blood volume, the body increases its blood pressure. So next hormone is endothelin hormone. This endothelin hormone is released by the endothelial cells of pulmonary circulation under the influence of antidiuretic hormones, the catecholamines, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, the angiotensin 2, right. These other hormones makes the endothelial cell of the pulmonary circulation to release a hormone called as endothelin. This endothelin again activates the sympathetic nervous system and do vasoconstriction, right, vasoconstriction of all the blood vessels, and leading to, and also increases the contractility of the heart muscle, right, vasoconstriction leading to increase in blood volume, thereby increasing in blood pressure. Next is the atrial and the ventricular cells. The atria and the ventricles of the heart, under the influence of excessive myocyte stretching, that means if the blood volume is increased, that will lead to the accumulation of more blood inside the atria and the ventricles, that will lead to the stretching of the atria and the ventricles, right, and that stretching will lead to the release of hormones, atrial natriuretic peptide ANP and brain natriuretic peptide. BNP. This brain natriuretic peptide is also released from brain and ventricles. First is it was discovered from the brain, that is why it was called as brain natriuretic peptide. Otherwise it is also it can also be called as ventricle natriuretic peptide. So this ANP and BNP, they work antagonistic to other um, other mechanisms. They do vasodilation and they do diuresis, absolutely opposite to other hormones, right? And vasodilation and diuresis leads to decrease in blood pressure. So this is one of the rarest or one of the only mechanisms which leads to fall in BP. Whenever the body senses that the blood pressure has increased, right, it decreases its blood pressure by releasing ANP and BNP. So we can understand more by this diagram, right? The renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, the RAS system. The RAS system increases blood volume, in turn increases blood pressure. Angiotensin, tensinogen to angiotensin, angiotensin to angiotensin 1, then angiotensin 2, then aldosterone, right? Angiotensin 2 also makes the posterior pituitary to secrete ADH, right? ADH again works on PCT to reabsorb water and sodium, aldosterone to reabsorb more water and sodium, right? The ANP and the BNP, atrial natriuretic peptide from the heart atrium and heart ventricle, right, which works antagonistic to other mechanisms, right? It basically do vasodilation and causes fall in blood pressure, right? Then we have aldosterone is renin is done, right? So these are the neurohormonal systems which regulate the blood pressure and heart rate. Now we have to understand what is end systolic volume and diastolic volume, stroke volume and preload. So we know what is systole and what is diastole. Systole is the contraction and diastole is the relaxation of ventricles. So systole is the pumping and diastole is the relaxation. So and diastolic volume. Volume means blood volume we are talking about, and means at the end of systole. Right. So the blood volume at the end of systole, right, in the ventricles is end systolic volume. So whenever the systole has ended, whenever the contraction or the pumping of the ventricles have ended, there is some leftover blood in the ventricles, right? And that leftover blood is called as end systolic volume. Then we have end diastolic volume. So end diastolic volume is the volume of the blood which remains at the end of a diastole. So when the diastole, the relaxation of the ventricles has completed and the ventricles are filled with blood, right? So that volume of blood in the ventricles at the end of diastole is called as end diastolic volume. It is also called as preload. Then we have stroke volume. Stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped from the left ventricle in one beat. So every cardiac cycle, the blood pumped from the left ventricle, right, and the right ventricle also, right, is stroke volume. Stroke volume is the difference in the end diastolic volume, that is total blood volume in the ventricle, and end diastolic and systolic volume, that is the volume left after the systole is over, after the contraction is over, there is some blood left inside the heart. So the difference between them is the stroke volume. So stroke volume is the blood pumped into the pulmonary artery and into the arc of aorta. So we can understand more about this systole and diastole, the same thing. So the end diastolic volume. So when the diastole has ended, right, the diastole has ended, the ventricles are relaxing and the blood is pouring from the atria into the ventricles. The total blood in the ventricle, in both the ventricles at the end of the diastole, when the heart has relaxed completely, that is end diastolic volume, right? End diastolic volume, similar to this. So this end diastolic volume, right, end diastolic volume. This end diastolic volume is also called as preload, right? And when systole has finished, when the ventricles have contracted and pushed the blood into the arc of aorta and into the pulmonary artery, right? Then the amount of blood left in the ventricles, in the both ventricles, that is called as end systolic volume. So let us talk about the cardiac output now when we have learnt about the stroke volume. So cardiac output is the is the is cardiac output is the output of the cardia in 1 minute, or we can also in 1 minute. So in 1 minute, how much blood is pumped by the heart, that is the cardiac output. So this cardiac output is approximately 5 liter in healthy humans at resting stage, 5 liters per minute. So the heart pumps around 5 liters of blood in 1 minute. It is calculated by multiplying the heart rate and stroke volume. So heart rate, let us take the normal heart rate as 72 beats per minute and stroke volume as 70 ml for a 70 kg man. For a 70 kg man, the end systolic volume, that means the blood left in the ventricles, the leftover blood in the ventricles, when the ventricles have finished the systole, all the ventricles have finished pumping the blood into the aorta and into the pulmonary artery. So the leftover blood is approximately 50 ml. And diastolic volume, the end diastolic volume is the total volume of blood after diastole has ended, right? So the heart has approximately 120 ml for a 70 kg man. So 120 minus 50 is 70, and 72 cross 70 is 5 liters. So it is approximately 5 liters, right? Now the stroke volume and heart rate, it depends on various factors. For example, autonomic nervous system, we have already talked about. Hormones, we have already talked about hormones. Fitness levels, age, and the stroke volume also depends on certain factors like contractility of the heart, that means the myocardial tissue, how much it can contract, whether the myocardial tissue is healthy or not. Then the preload, the stroke volume depends on the preload and diastolic volume. If end diastolic volume is more, let us say from 120 it is 150, then definitely the stroke volume will increase. So the end diastolic volume, that means more blood in the ventricle before systole, leads to more stroke volume. This is very obvious, right? So end diastolic volume or preload, more preload means more stroke volume. Then afterload, the afterload, if it is less, that means more stroke volume. If afterload is more, that means low stroke volume, right? We will talk about this afterload. Gender, male has more stroke volume, fitness levels, heart size, right? So cardiac output is heart rate into stroke volume. The next thing, before we go into the afterload, is ejection fraction. So ejection fraction is nothing but a calculation in percentage for end diastolic volume, right? So for stroke volume, so it is percentage of blood volume ejected from ventricle during systole. Simply it is percentage of end diastolic volume, not stroke volume, end diastolic volume. So ejection fraction is calculated by dividing stroke volume by end diastolic volume, right? That means if, let us say, the end diastolic volume is 120 ml, as we were seeing in last slide, 120 ml and diastolic volume, and stroke volume is, let us say, 70, right? So 70 divided by 120 multiplied by 100. In a healthy individual, it will be between 50 to 70%. That means only 50 to 70% of the blood from the left ventricle is pushed into the aorta, and similarly only 50 to 70% of the blood from the right ventricle is pushed into the pulmonary artery, right? So the healthy ejection fraction is between 50 to 70%. This is very important, and nowadays heart failure is based on ejection fraction of the ventricles. So normal healthy ejection fraction is 50 to 70%. You can look into this picture also, right? So ejection fraction is the stroke volume, the amount of blood pumped out of the ventricles. You can see the ventricles are in a systolic condition where the systole has taken place and the ventricles have contracted and pushed the blood into the respective arteries, right? So the amount of blood pumped into the ventricle, let us say it is 70 ml, right, in a 70 kg man at resting state, and divided by the end diastolic volume, the total volume of the blood in the ventricles at the end of diastole, or you can say just before the systole, right, before the systole has started. So total amount, that is approximately 120 ml in a 70 kg man, right? So like that we can calculate the ejection fraction, and it should be between 50 to 70% for a normal heart. The We will talk about systolic and diastolic heart failure in the heart failure slides. The heart failure is divided into, nowadays the latest classification for heart failure is under two categories. One is with reduced ejection fraction and one is with preserved ejection fraction. Right? So heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So whenever the ejection fraction is reduced because of the reasons of the causes of the heart failure, the reduced ejection fraction is called as, previously it was called as systolic failure, whereas preserved ejection fraction previously it was called as diastolic failure. So these systolic and diastolic failures terms have been replaced by ejection fractions, the reduced ejection fractions and the preserved ejection fractions. Heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and heart failures with preserved. So we know that the preload is the end diastolic volume, that is the blood volume in the ventricles at the end of diastole, or simply the blood volume in the ventricles before the systole is about to start. So this is approximately 120 ml. So this is preload. Now the afterload. The afterload is the vascular resistance against which ventricles has to generate the cardiac output, right? So the blood from the ventricles has to be pushed into the aorta and into the pulmonary artery, right? The aorta and the pulmonary artery are offering resistance. They will not allow the blood to go into them because of the existing blood in them and the blood pressure by these blood vessels, right? These blood vessels also create a resistance. So that resistance is vascular resistance. So the vascular resistance of the arc of aorta, the vascular resistance of the aorta is systemic vascular resistance, and the vascular resistance of the pulmonary artery is pulmonary vascular resistance. So the left ventricle experiences systemic vascular resistance. It means that in order to left ventricle to pump blood into the aorta, it has to overcome the systemic vascular resistance. Right? When this systemic vascular resistance is overcome, only then the blood can be pushed, or the resistance offered by these arc of aorta should be less, and the force generated by the ventricle should be more. Right? So that resistance by the systemic, by the aorta and by the pulmonary artery is systemic vascular resistance and the pulmonary vascular resistance. So this is afterload, right? So we have studied preload and now afterload. So these are the cardiac responses for decrease in blood pressure and blood volume. You can go through them. The baroreceptors and the chemoreceptors at these sites, they are sensitive to the stretch. The baroreceptors are sensitive to the stretch of these arteries, these blood vessels, and the chemoreceptors are sensitive to the changes in oxygen saturation of the blood and the increasing carbon dioxide saturation and the pH level and the lactic acid. Right? These baroreceptors, whenever they stimulate, they suppresses the, whenever they generate a response, they suppresses the parasympathetic activity, and these chemoreceptors, they increase the sympathetic activity. We know that whenever sympathetic activity is increased, it will lead to increased heart rate, and whenever this parasympathetic activity is suppressed, it leads to decrease in heart rate. It leads to increase in heart rate, right? And increasing heart rate leads to increase in stroke volume, right? And the overall effect is that the blood pressure will increase. Similarly, These receptors, they also respond to the increase in blood pressure. So whenever there is an increase in blood volume, these baroreceptors, they experience the stretch, increasing stretch, and the chemoreceptors, whenever there is increasing oxygen or the decreasing carbon dioxide or the H positive ions are also decreased, then it leads to the sympathetic stimulation, the suppression of the sympathetic stimulation. When the sympathetic stimulation is suppressed, it leads to decrease in heart rate, and on the inverse, the parasympathetic stimulation leads to decrease in heart rate, right? Thereby overall the blood pressure decreases. So the baroreceptors and chemoreceptors are responsible for the increase in blood volume and blood pressure through neurohumoral system. The cardiovascular blood circulation, we already have discussed about the blood circulation. The heart has four chambers, the atria, ventricle, the left and the right. The ventricle pushes the blood, right, which is the stroke volume, approximately 70 ml in a 70 kg individual, into the arc of aorta. Every beat and every cardiac cycle is of 0.8 seconds. So approximately 5 liter per minute blood is pushed into the aorta. Similar blood is pushed into the pulmonary artery also, the arc of aorta, the ascending aorta. The ascending aorta divides into three branches: the brachiocephalic, the left carotid, and the left subclavian. The left subclavian goes, it becomes axillary artery, then it becomes brachial artery, then it becomes radial artery and ulnar artery, right? And the arc of aorta goes into descending aorta, and descending aorta goes into thoracic aorta. Thoracic aorta gives brachial artery. Then after thoracic aorta, it becomes abdominal aorta, celiac trunk, and then the hepatic artery, the splenic artery, the gastric artery, and then it goes down the renal artery, and after renal artery, before renal artery, it is the inferior mesenteric artery, the superior mesenteric artery, and then it divides into iliac artery, the common iliac artery, then external iliac, the internal iliac. The internal iliac goes to the femoral artery then divides at the popliteal fossa to popliteal artery again divides into anterior tibialis, posterior tibialis, and similarly the venous system also, right? So this is the quick recap of the physiology of the heart. Now we will go into the heart failure in the next lecture.